What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome to another miniature rescue. This week, I finally give in and start the rescue on some Tau from Warhammer 40,000. I just flew in from a fantastic convention called SoonerCon out in Norman, Oklahoma, where I got to teach some mini painting classes, help judge the mini painting competition, and meet and hang out with a ton of awesome hobby friends. I am, without a doubt, pretty beat. But I saw a few things there that made me want to dig through some minis that I haven't given enough attention to, and see what I could do with them. Tau have been kind of a weird faction for me. I've never been a huge fan of space robots, so I've never really gone for this army. I mean, robots are pretty great, but space mechs in general are really hit or miss for me. Either I think they look really good or they just don't, and Tau are right in the middle for me, where some of the suits look really slick and can be posed to look great, and some just look kind of clunky and weird. Still, throughout the last few years, I have found some rather good deals that were very hard to pass up on eBay and Facebook Marketplace. But what that ends up looking like are a bunch of models thrown together somewhere in my office in a bag, and I'm pretty sure I have more somewhere else. I just don't 100% know where they are right at this moment, which is kind of weird. Doesn't really matter though. There are more than enough here to get a jump start on an army and get something going. So let's take a closer look. There are a few models in the collection that I have that are definitely in need of paint, and there are a couple of them that actually don't look half bad by themselves. These red, gold, and green fellas are looking pretty cool, and the stencil work isn't bad. The main issue is that all these models will need to be gone over with a knife and checked for mold lines, excess plastic, and glue. And in the case of this big guy right here, pieces just need to be fixed or replaced. For now, I'm going to drop all the models into the sonic cleaner and get them started. There's dust and paint that will be removed, and the cleanup process can begin from there. But before we get to cleaning up these models, let me tell you about today's excellent sponsor, FlexiSpot. FlexiSpot was kind enough to send me their E7 Pro desk and help me upgrade my hobby space. Now, I've been using FlexiSpot tables and chairs for quite some time now, but none of them have been as awesome as the E7 Pro. The table was a breeze to put together with clear instructions and everything I needed right in the box. After getting everything put together, you can see just how sturdy this thing is. Everything feels rock solid and heavy duty. The E7 Pro desk has an unbeatable weight bearing capacity too of up to 440 pounds, which I still don't think you would hit if you put every model you own on top of it. The real deal is that the desk is built strong and is extremely stable at every angle. And even when it's moving, I'm not worried that any of my art supplies or models are just gonna fall off the table. One of my favorite things about this desk is its edges. If you're like me and you steady your arms against your desk while you're painting or lay your wrist down to get a good handle on a mini, you end up with red lines across your arms where the edges dig in. It's really not great for your arms and posture. By comparison, the E7 Pro has a smooth incline and rounded edges at the front that make painting at this desk really comfortable. Feels better on my arms and wrists, and I don't have to worry about cutting off the circulation like on hard edges. There's also power built into the controller with a USB port, super handy for extra lights or my phone to be plugged in. And I decided to attach the optional power unit as well, that clips onto the back or the side of the desk and gives several extra plugs for things like Dremels or hair dryers. And also USB-A and C, which is awesome to have right next to me and keep everything going for those long sessions. The best part about the E7 Pro desk is the 15-year warranty, so you never have to worry about something going wrong. Even if it did, which is unlikely, you got 15 years to think about it. The E7 Pro desk is a fantastic addition to my hobby space, and I can't recommend it enough. Check out the links in the description and pinned comment below and finally get that hobby space upgrade that you really need. Thank you FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to those minis. The Riptide. Come to find out, that's not actually a Riptide. It's in fact a Tau Ghost Keel, which is very similar, really cool model even still. Doesn't actually have a shield, which I have somewhere. And I'm pretty sure it's because I actually do have a Riptide somewhere in my office. So just thought I should let you know. This is a Ghost Keel. I'm sure I will refer to it as a Riptide multiple times. So just a heads up. The largest suit that I have, and I'm pretty sure I have another one somewhere, is pretty badly damaged and missing the shield. I know that I bought this with the shield, but again, it's somewhere in my office, I don't know. But I want to get to work right away and not focus too hard on trying to find it right now, so I'd rather have something going and just hope I run into it sooner rather than later. I did at least find an STL file online that looks to be an excellent replica of the actual shield, so that won't stand out as something that doesn't belong. The idea is that I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of super glue so that the contact point sticks and it'll be temporary. I gave all the models a quick bath and that really got the dust and dirt off of them. The models with paint can be scrubbed clean with a toothbrush and then we can get to cleaning and fixing them. Most of these models have been assembled pretty well. The only real issue are the mold lines. I take my time and go through each model and remove them with my X-Acto blade. The Riptide is a great looking mech, normally. In this case, it's gonna need some extra attention. I spent a good amount of time shaving off mold lines and sanding down the surfaces, but the real issue is that one of the legs is broken off completely and the other one just kind of popped out of the ball socket. So at least that's easy enough to put back on. The arms though, both of them were posed in a pretty weird way. Now what I think actually happened is while the plastic glue was drying, it was still a little bit wet, and the arms just slumped down while it was just sitting on a desk. So both arms are kind of pointed down and touching the body at a weird angle. In order to correct this, I decided to cut off the arms and try and repose the model as best I could. Something a little bit more dynamic. Using Milliput, I can at least fill in some of the gaps from the plastic that was cut away, and it's looking properly attached to the model. Luckily, I was able to find a decent look for the model, and once the primer goes down, I think it's going to look fine. After getting everything cleaned up, I can move on to the basing, or pre-basing, I guess. For this army, I wanted to keep everything as simple as you can get, so I grabbed my tub of beach sand and a little bottle of PVA. With an old brush, I can spread out the glue and get it right up to the edge of each base. Dip the whole thing in the bucket of sand and instantly get a nice variety of rock sizes. And the best part? It's free. The sand is free. I've had this tub for something like 4 or 5 years now, and I've used it a ton, but it's still going strong and it pretty much always turns out really nice. Once the glue is dry, it's time to prime the models. While I was cleaning some of these models, I did notice that some of the shoulder pads are actually 3D printed. At least I'm pretty sure they are. They're a little bit bigger than the standard shoulder pads, and they stand out quite a bit. They're not too bad at all, and I think it's interesting that before I even got these, somebody was missing parts or something and already tried to 3D print and make new ones. So I guess our 3D printed shield isn't actually that out of place. The last thing that needs to be done is to get all the basing materials on and get them primed up and actually prepped for paint. Part of the reason I haven't wanted to work on these models is because of those wonky looking mechs that I mentioned earlier, but also because there is a weird mix of armor panels and organic material. I suppose I've been a bit unsure how to approach these models and exactly how to paint them. I decided though that focusing on the armor was probably the best approach, seeing as a majority of the army are either vehicles or troops with helmets on. There are a ton of poofy pants on these guys, but not a ton of heads and faces to paint. See what I mean? I started with a dark jade for the base of the armor. I want to go up to a nice bright muted green that looks like a kind of military armor. This gives more options for accent colors later on. Almost any kind of saturated bright color will stand out on an armor like this, and I feel like I can consistently get it to look the way that I want, which is pretty important when you're painting an entire army. Consistency over complicated makes the army look much better on the table. If you want to get fancy, then you can always come back and punch up each quad with extra colors in freehand. Covering most of the black with that dark teal, I can start to bring out the armor panels with the mid-tone. I'm going to do my best to modulate the highlights across the armor. So if there is shadow on one side of a panel, then it'll bump up against the highlight right where the angles change on the panel. The mid-tone will push up halfway across each piece, and I'm going to try really hard not to cover up the shadow on the darkest areas of the model. I want there to be as much contrast as I can get on this first pass. Finally, the desaturated highlight on the ends of those transitions to really show the difference in each panel. There are a few helmet varieties on these models. The one that looks a lot like the pit droids in Star Wars, and the other sleeker ones with crisp lines that are easy to see. Now the pit droid ones are fine, but they don't give you the opportunity to alternate the pattern of color like the other ones, so I like them a little bit less. Once the base coat is taken care of, I can come in with black and block out the rest of the model. Everything else will be black for now. I want all the cloth to break up the bright armor, and anything that will end up being metallic will look better over a black base coat. From there I can pick out a few details with a bright gold, something that I like the look of quite a bit, and on larger models we can throw in some silver to break that up. It should look pretty good, just a few details not to overdo it. Next up, I want to start doing some edge highlighting with a couple of different colors. I did try some light teal, but it was coming across a little bit too blue, so I ended up opting for a desaturated bright yellow to bring out the bright green armor. That looked pretty nice, and it gave the effect that I was after with the modulating light and color on the armor, like sweet old power swords, but on armor panels. The black all gets a quick overbrush of dark gray on the raised details, and the gun gets a quick edge highlight, something to help the pieces stand out but still stay dark and break up those panels. The last thing for now is to paint the rocky base brown and do a quick dry brush of that same desaturated yellow over the top to pick out those little rocks. When I was at SoonerCon this year, I saw a good amount of mechs, and I really got to thinking that I could really get in there and paint some robots. There's so many ways to go with models like these, and it gets even deeper when you start to think about panel lining and really giving separation to the parts of a robot suit. For getting an army on the table quickly, and even deciding if that's something I actually want to spend time doing, I've discovered a couple of things. These models are not as intense, I guess, as I thought they were going to be. A few airbrush tricks and colors I like, and these are pretty nice to look at on the table. The bases aren't overwhelming, and I like the way that they look with that color. Probably more importantly is that they were actually fun to paint. The mix of hard armor panels and cloth or skin in some spots felt like a nice way to break things up. I could use different tools on each piece to get the different effects that in itself contrast on the models. I did go and paint the commander off camera to really see if I actually enjoyed it, and with this workup I was very happy with the outcome. Still more work to be done on a larger model like this, but for a tabletop model I can't complain at all. Even the simple base on a larger scale doesn't bother me, although some tufts and dead plants would be appropriate for this look. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Sometimes you find little things that motivate you in the hobby, a tiny reason to start a project or get back into something that you put down. And those are the little sparks of enjoyment that I really love to encounter. Going to a convention and seeing something making you want to come back and start a project. You really never know where they come from and where they're going to take you, but it's a good idea to listen up and do something fun with your hobby when you're motivated. Now, there was no way that I was going to be able to finish even the models that I prepped this week. The goal was to discover something new and prep this army for something else entirely. It also happens to be something special that I can't talk about right now, but I am almost ready to let you in on the secret. Until then, thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.